Stop scrolling. The next coin you ignore could be the one collectors have been hunting for years. Welcome back to Change Your Life. Today, we're uncovering 4 Kennedy half dollars that almost everyone treats like ordinary pocket change. 1971 D Kennedy half dollar. 1993 D Kennedy half dollar. 1972 D Kennedy half dollar. 1992 D Kennedy half dollar. Here's the twist. Millions of these coins were minted, yet every year collectors continue searching through bankrolls, old jars, estate collections, and forgotten boxes because a tiny minting detail can completely change a coin story. In this video, you'll discover the history behind each coin, the features collectors actually inspect, the mint marks that deserve attention, and the surprising details that most people miss. Don't assume your coin is ordinary just because it looks worn. Some of the most interesting discoveries have come from heavily circulated half dollars that everyone else overlooked. So before you spend another Kennedy half dollar, stay with me until the very end. Because coin number 4 is the one that surprises the most. Let's begin with coin number 1. Nobody inside the Denver Mint stopped working on that cold morning in 1971. The presses never paused. The steel dies never hesitated. The conveyor belts kept moving exactly as they had the day before, carrying thousands of blank planchets toward machines capable of striking hundreds of coins every minute. The floor vibrated beneath heavy equipment. The sharp scent of lubricating oil mixed with warm metal. Every thunderous impact echoed through the building, yet after hearing the same sound every day, most workers barely noticed it anymore. Another blank entered the striking chamber. Another press came down with incredible force. Another Kennedy half dollar was born. Then another. And another. No one standing beside those machines could have pointed to a single coin and said, "Collectors will study this one 50 years from now." To them, every coin looked exactly the same. History often begins that way. Quietly. The coin resting in your hand today may have started its journey during one of those ordinary production shifts in Denver. It may have rolled into a counting machine before sunrise, been sealed inside a Federal Reserve bag before lunch, and reached a local bank only days later. Within weeks it could have been riding inside the pocket of a truck driver, a waitress, a factory worker, or a father buying groceries for his family. It was never meant to become famous. It was only meant to circulate. That is exactly what makes the 1971 D Kennedy half dollar so fascinating today. Because sometimes the most overlooked coins hide the most interesting stories. And there is one feature about certain 1971 D coins that even experienced collectors occasionally miss. We will uncover that mystery shortly, but first we need to understand the America that created this coin. The year was 1971. The United States stood at the edge of enormous economic and cultural change. Families gathered every evening around television sets to watch the nightly news. Radio stations filled the air with rock music that defined an entire generation. New automobiles lined dealership lots, and supermarkets grew larger than ever before. The country was moving forward, even while carrying the weight of uncertainty. Money reflected those changes. Only a few years earlier, Americans had watched silver slowly disappear from everyday circulating coins. Older generations remembered the unmistakable sound of silver pieces striking one another inside a pocket. Younger Americans barely noticed the transition. By 1971, the change had become reality. The Kennedy half dollar entering circulation from Denver was no longer a traditional silver circulation coin. It was struck using a durable copper-nickel clad construction designed to withstand years of use while reducing production costs. Most people never looked closely enough to notice. Collectors would. That difference became one of the defining stories of modern American coinage. Every time someone accepted a Kennedy half dollar in change, they unknowingly held a small piece of a changing economy. The coin still carried the powerful portrait of President John F. Kennedy, but beneath its surface, America had entered a completely different monetary era. The design itself remained deeply symbolic. Kennedy's profile face is left with quiet confidence, surrounded by the word liberty, while the national motto, "In God We Trust," rests below the portrait. The date 1971 appears proudly at the bottom, while the small d mint mark identifies Denver as its birthplace. Turn the coin over. The presidential seal dominates the reverse. An eagle spreads its wings while gripping arrows in one claw and an olive branch in the other. 50 stars surround the design, reminding every holder that this was more than currency. It represented the United States itself. Millions of these coins were struck. That simple fact causes many people to dismiss them immediately. They should not. Because experienced collectors understand something beginners often overlook. Common coins can still become extraordinary under the right circumstances. Condition changes everything. Errors change everything. Authentication changes everything. And patience changes everything. Imagine you have just found a 1971 D. Kennedy $50 inside an old jar at home. Do not clean it. That single decision could preserve years of collector potential. Cleaning removes original surfaces, creates unnatural hairline scratches, and often reduces collector desirability instead of increasing it. Even a bright, shiny clean coin may be worth less than an untouched example showing honest circulation. Instead, hold the coin only by its edges. Place it beneath a single light source positioned at a low angle rather than directly overhead. As the light glides across the surface, tiny details begin appearing that ordinary room lighting completely hides. Now take out a 10x loupe. This simple magnifier becomes one of the most valuable tools any collector can own. Study Kennedy's hair carefully. Examine every letter. Inspect the date. Look closely at the mint mark. Do not rush. Coins reward patience. At first everything may appear perfectly ordinary. Then your eyes begin adjusting. Tiny die polish lines become visible. Minute contact marks tell stories of decades spent inside pockets and cash drawers. The fields reflect light differently depending upon how the dies struck the metal. Suddenly the coin no longer looks ordinary. It looks alive with evidence. This is where many beginners make an important mistake. They confuse machine doubling with a genuine double die obverse. The two can appear surprisingly similar to inexperienced eyes. Machine doubling usually creates flat, shelf-like secondary images caused by slight movement during striking. It is interesting but generally carries little collector premium. A true double die obverse, however, originates much earlier during die creation itself. The doubling is actually built into the die and repeated on every coin struck from it. Properly attributed examples attract far greater collector interest because they represent a genuine mint variety rather than a striking disturbance. Knowing the difference separates careful study from simple guesswork. There is another test almost anyone can perform at home. Rotate the coin by flipping it on its vertical axis. If the reverse design appears significantly rotated instead of aligning correctly with the obverse, you may have discovered a rotational die error. Such pieces are uncommon and deserve careful evaluation before drawing conclusions. Then inspect the edge. Look for the familiar copper-colored stripe running between the outer nickel layers. That stripe confirms the standard clad construction used for regular circulation issues. If you ever encounter a coin that appears to have an entirely silver-colored edge with no visible copper stripe, do not immediately assume it is valuable. Investigate carefully. Rare wrong planchet errors do exist, but many ordinary explanations can produce unusual appearances. Careful examination always comes before excitement. And that careful examination leads directly into one of the biggest surprises hiding inside the story of the 1971 D. Kennedy $50. That surprise begins with something almost no one thinks about. Not the date. Not the mint mark. The dies. Every Kennedy $50 begins its life with two hardened steel dies carrying the coin's design in reverse. Those dies are forced together with enormous pressure thousands upon thousands of times every day. Each strike transfers every detail of President Kennedy's portrait and the presidential seal onto another waiting planchet. Steel is strong. But steel is not immortal. As the hours pass, the dies slowly wear. Tiny cracks may begin forming. Minute polishing marks appear after maintenance. Microscopic changes develop that no cashier in 1971 would ever notice. Yet decades later, collectors armed with magnification and patience can sometimes identify exactly where a die had reached a particular stage of its working life. That is one reason two 1971 D. Kennedy half-dollars can look surprisingly different even though they were struck only days apart. One may show razor-sharp hair detail. Another may appear slightly softer. Neither is necessarily rare. Neither is necessarily damaged. They simply tell different chapters of the mint's production story. And that is where collecting becomes detective work. Imagine opening a fresh roll of 1971 D. Kennedy half-dollars today. At first glance, every coin appears identical. Then you begin comparing them side by side. One has brighter luster. Another has cleaner fields. A third displays unusually strong detail on the eagle's feathers. A fourth reveals a faint raised line crossing part of the design. Suddenly 20 ordinary coins become 20 different investigations. This is why experienced collectors rarely judge a coin in only a few seconds. They slow down. They compare. They question everything. There is another mystery hiding inside many collections, and even experienced dealers occasionally overlook it during busy coin shows. We are about to uncover it. Before looking for expensive errors, always verify the simplest details first. Check the rim. Check the edge. Check the surfaces. Then examine the weight using a reliable digital scale. A normal 1971 D. Kennedy half-dollar should match the mint's specifications within normal manufacturing tolerances. If a coin's weight appears dramatically different, that does not automatically mean it is valuable, but it does mean the coin deserves closer study before any conclusions are reached. Sometimes the explanation is simple. Sometimes it is extraordinary. That is exactly why careful collectors record their observations instead of making immediate assumptions. Now let us talk about the mint errors that continue attracting collectors. A genuine off-center strike occurs when the planchet is not perfectly positioned beneath the dies before the strike. The farther the design moves away from the center while still leaving the date visible, the more desirable many collectors find the coin. Historical auction records suggest that dramatic authenticated examples often command stronger premiums than minor off-center strikes, although values fluctuate with market conditions. Another fascinating error is the broad-struck Kennedy half-dollar. Normally a retaining collar surrounds the planchet during striking, creating the finished diameter and raised rim. If that collar fails to contain the strike properly, the metal spreads outward, producing a noticeably different appearance. Broad-struck examples immediately stand out when compared beside normal coins. Then there are die cracks. Some collectors actively search for them. Others overlook them completely. As working dies age under repeated striking pressure, fine fractures may develop. Molten metal is not involved. Instead, the coining pressure forces metal into those tiny openings, leaving raised lines on the finished coin. Some die cracks are tiny. Others become dramatic enough to stretch across major design elements. Every crack tells the story of a die reaching the end of its working life. Perhaps the most exciting possibility of all is the wrong planchet error. These errors occur when a coin is accidentally struck on a blank intended for another denomination or composition. They are genuinely rare. Documented sales have shown that authenticated wrong planchet Kennedy half-dollars can attract remarkable collector attention because they combine unmistakable mint mistakes with extreme scarcity. But there is an important warning every honest collector should hear. The internet is filled with altered coins being advertised as rare mint errors. Many are not genuine. Professional certification is required before any value can be assigned. That sentence cannot be repeated too often. PCGS and NGC remain the most trusted grading services for authenticating important varieties, mint errors, and high-grade examples. Raw ungraded coins carry no reliable premium simply because someone online claims they are valuable. Knowledge protects collectors. Excitement alone does not. Now let us talk about condition, because condition often matters even more than the date itself. Most 1971 D. Kennedy half-dollars entered circulation immediately after leaving the mint. They spent years moving through banks, restaurants, grocery stores, vending operations, casinos, and family wallets. Every transaction added another tiny mark. Every pocket added another contact scratch. Every cash register drawer slowly reduced the possibility of achieving an elite mint state grade decades later. That is why pristine examples are much harder to locate than many people expect. Collectors pay close attention to the highest certified grades, especially MS65, MS66, MS67, and the elusive MS68. The difference between those grades may seem small to beginners, but under expert examination even the tiniest imperfections matter. Historical auction records suggest that exceptional certified examples often outperform average specimens by substantial margins. Documented sales have shown that eye appeal, luster, strike quality, and preservation all influence collector demand. Values fluctuate with market conditions. No honest expert guarantees future prices. That uncertainty is part of the adventure. Because every coin tells two stories. The first is its history. The second is its survival. The 1971 D. Kennedy $50 survived changing economies, changing technology, changing generations, and changing habits. Many disappeared into circulation forever. Others rested quietly inside bank vaults, dresser drawers, family collections, and forgotten coffee cans, waiting decades for someone curious enough to notice them again. Margaret looked down at the little cardboard coin holder she had just labeled. She smiled. Not because she believed she had found a fortune. Because she had learned something far more valuable. She had learned to observe. As she reached back into the old coffee can, another $50 slid across the table. The date was different. 1993 D. It belonged to a completely different America. And the story hidden inside that coin was even more unexpected than the one she had just uncovered. The coin you are about to examine has sold for more than many people would expect from a modern $50, and yet another coin that looks almost identical may be worth only its face value. That single sentence has sparked countless searches through old bankrolls, dresser drawers, inherited collections, and forgotten coin albums. It also raises the most important question every collector should ask. How can two coins that look almost identical end up following completely different paths? The answer begins in 1993. Not inside a collector's display case. Inside America itself. Picture an ordinary autumn afternoon in 1993. The evening news talks about a rapidly changing world. Personal computers are beginning to appear in more homes. Compact discs are replacing cassette tapes. Shopping malls are crowded. Children ride bicycles through neighborhoods where cash is still king, yet the Kennedy $50 has already started disappearing from everyday transactions. Ask almost anyone to make change for $1. They reach for quarters. Not $50. By 1993, the Kennedy $50 had become a coin that millions of Americans rarely handled, even though the United States Mint continued producing it. That contradiction makes this year fascinating. The coin existed. But it was slowly vanishing from daily life. While most people stopped noticing $50 altogether, the Denver Mint continued its work with remarkable precision. Long before sunrise, employees stepped onto the production floor. Massive presses waited like giant mechanical hearts. Bright overhead lights reflected from polished steel. Conveyors carried blank planchets toward machines that never became tired. The sound was unforgettable. Metal striking metal. Again. 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 Each impact lasted only an instant. Yet every strike permanently shaped history. No worker could identify which individual coin might someday appear inside an auction catalog or become the centerpiece of a collector's set. Their responsibility was consistency. And consistency became the defining characteristic of the 1993 D. Kennedy $50. Every blank planchet entered the striking chamber. The dies descended with extraordinary pressure. The design transferred instantly. The finished coin moved away. Another blank immediately replaced it. Thousands every hour. Millions during the production year. From a distance the process appeared almost perfect. Look closer. Perfection always leaves tiny fingerprints. That is one of the greatest lessons modern coin collecting teaches us. The smallest details often tell the biggest stories. Now imagine you are holding a 1993 D Kennedy half-dollar beneath a bright desk lamp. At first glance, the coin appears almost flawless. Kennedy's portrait remains bold and familiar. The lettering is crisp. The fields reflect light smoothly. The Denver mint mark rests beneath the date with quiet confidence. Turn the coin over. The presidential seal fills the reverse with remarkable balance. Every feather, every star, every line within the shield reminds you that this design was created to represent the strength of the nation itself. Most people stop looking there. Collectors never do. Instead, they begin asking questions. How sharp was the strike? How original are the surfaces? Has the coin ever been cleaned? Has it been damaged? Has it developed attractive natural toning? Those questions separate experienced collectors from casual observers. And there is one feature hidden on many modern Kennedy half-dollars that surprises beginners every year. We are about to examine it. Before searching for rare varieties, always begin with the basics. Hold the coin only by its edges. Even clean hands leave natural oils behind. Next, position a single light source at a low angle across the surface instead of shining the light directly downward. Tiny imperfections suddenly become visible as shadows move across Kennedy's portrait. Then bring out a 10x loop. Do not search for expensive errors immediately. Study the entire coin first. Notice the fields. Notice the lettering. Notice the eagle. Notice the rims. Training your eyes to recognize a normal coin is the first step toward recognizing an unusual one. Many collectors skip this stage. That is a mistake. Because extraordinary discoveries are usually made by people who first understand what ordinary looks like. Now examine the lettering carefully. Some beginners become excited after noticing what appears to be doubling. Sometimes that excitement is justified. Most of the time it is not. Machine doubling remains one of the most misunderstood features on modern coins. It usually appears flat, shelf-like, and lacks the rounded appearance associated with genuine hub doubling. A true doubled die obverse tells a completely different story. It originates during die creation itself rather than during the strike. Authentic examples are significantly more desirable because every coin struck from that die carries the same doubled design. Learning the difference requires patience, not luck. Rotate the coin by flipping it on its vertical axis. The reverse should align properly with the obverse. If it does not, further examination may be worthwhile because genuine rotational die errors occasionally appear despite the mint's careful quality controls. Most coins will be perfectly normal. A few will not. That possibility keeps collectors searching year after year. There is still another mystery waiting beneath the surface of the 1993 D Kennedy half-dollar. And understanding it requires looking beyond the coin itself, toward the people who quietly chose to save them while everyone else stopped paying attention. That quiet decision changed everything. By 1993, most Americans no longer carried Kennedy half-dollars in their pockets every day. Cashiers rarely placed one in change. Banks often kept them in storage unless someone specifically requested them. Children growing up in the early 1990s could easily go months without ever seeing a half-dollar in circulation. Without realizing it, the public had transformed the coin into something unusual. Not rare. Invisible. And there is an important difference between those two words. A rare coin is difficult to find because very few exist. An invisible coin is difficult to find because people stopped looking for it. That distinction has inspired generations of collectors to search through old bankrolls, inherited collections, and forgotten family coin jars. Sometimes they discover nothing unusual. Sometimes they discover something unforgettable. That is why every serious collector begins with careful observation rather than hopeful imagination. Place the coin beneath your light once more. Move it slowly. Watch the luster travel across the surface like a wave. If the light suddenly breaks or becomes dull in one isolated area, stop and investigate. It may be nothing more than an old contact mark from another coin inside a mint bag. Or it may reveal evidence of an unusual strike characteristic worth examining further. The coin is patient. You should be too. Now shift your attention to the reverse. Study the eagle's wings. Look carefully at the shield. Inspect the stars surrounding the design. A weak strike sometimes leaves the highest details softer than expected, while a strong strike produces remarkable sharpness throughout the design. Neither automatically guarantees value. They simply tell the story of how that individual coin was born. There is another feature experienced collectors always inspect: the rim. A complete, well-formed rim tells you the collar functioned properly during striking. If part of the design appears missing because the blank was not perfectly centered, you may have discovered an off-center strike. Historical auction records suggest that dramatic authenticated examples showing a clear date and mint mark often attract greater collector interest than minor shifts. Another possibility is the broad-struck error. Without the retaining collar performing its job correctly, the metal spreads farther outward than normal during the strike. The result is immediately noticeable when placed beside an ordinary Kennedy $50. These pieces remain fascinating because they reveal what happens when one small mechanical component fails at exactly the wrong moment. Then there are die cracks. Every working die has a limited lifespan. After striking thousands upon thousands of coins under tremendous pressure, tiny fractures may develop inside the steel itself. When fresh planchets are struck, metal flows into those cracks, leaving raised lines across the finished coin. Some collectors actively build collections focused entirely on different die crack progressions. Others never notice them at all. That is the beauty of numismatics. Two people can study the same coin and see completely different stories. Perhaps the most exciting possibility remains the wrong planchet error. Imagine a Kennedy $50 accidentally struck on a blank intended for another denomination. It sounds unbelievable. Yet documented examples prove that such mint mistakes have occurred, although they are extraordinarily rare. Documented sales have shown that authenticated wrong planchet errors often become highlights of major collections because they combine unmistakable visual differences with genuine scarcity. But caution always comes first. Many altered coins are falsely advertised online as spectacular mint errors. Professional certification is required before any value can be assigned. That single sentence protects collectors from costly mistakes. The two grading companies most respected throughout the hobby remain PCGS and NGC. Their authentication and grading standards provide buyers and sellers with a trusted foundation that raw, uncertified coins simply cannot offer. That does not mean raw coins are unimportant. It means extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Now let us discuss condition. Most surviving 1993 Kennedy $50 are common. That is the honest truth. Millions were struck, and many remained well preserved because the denomination saw limited everyday use. Historical auction records suggest that ordinary circulated examples usually command modest collector interest, while exceptional mint state coins certified in MS65, MS66, MS67, or MS68 become progressively more difficult to locate. Documented sales have shown that originality, attractive luster, and minimal contact marks often matter just as much as the numerical grade itself. Values fluctuate with market conditions. No responsible collector promises guaranteed future prices. Instead, they encourage careful study, patience, and realistic expectations. Because the greatest reward in this hobby is rarely financial alone. It is the moment when history suddenly feels personal. Imagine holding a 1993 Kennedy $50 that has survived untouched for more than 3 decades. Think about everything that changed while that coin quietly waited. The internet transformed everyday life. Cell phones became smartphones. Paper maps disappeared from glove compartments. Children who were born the year this coin was struck are now adults building families of their own. The coin witnessed all of it. Silently. Without changing. That is why coins are often called time capsules. Not because they speak. Because they remember. As Margaret carefully placed the 1993 $50 beside the 1971 coin on her table, she realized something surprising. The two coins looked similar. But they felt completely different. One represented the beginning of a new era. The other represented an era that was quietly fading from everyday American life. She reached into the coffee can one more time. Another Kennedy $50 slid into her hand. The date read 1972D. And hidden inside that seemingly ordinary coin was one of the most misunderstood stories in the entire Kennedy $50 series. Almost nobody noticed the morning this coin was born. There was no national headline announcing it. No television crew stood inside the Denver Mint waiting for the first strike. No newspaper predicted that collectors would still be studying this date more than half a century later. And yet there is one mystery surrounding the 1972D Kennedy $50 that has puzzled collectors for decades, not because the Mint tried to hide it, but because almost everyone assumed it was just another ordinary coin. That assumption was the first mistake. To understand why, you have to step back into America in 1972. The country was moving forward at remarkable speed. Color televisions had become common in family living rooms. Interstate highways carried millions of Americans between growing cities. Shopping centers expanded. New homes appeared in rapidly developing suburbs. Life seemed faster than it had only a decade earlier. Money moved faster too. Coins changed hands constantly. But something interesting had happened to the Kennedy $50. People were using it less. The denomination still existed. Banks still received shipments. The Denver Mint still produced millions of examples. Yet more Americans reached for quarters instead. The $50 slowly drifted toward the edge of everyday commerce. Ironically, that helped many survive in far better condition than older circulating coins. While Americans lived their ordinary lives, the Denver Mint continued operating with relentless precision. Steel dies were installed before production began. Fresh planchets moved steadily toward powerful presses. Workers monitored equipment, adjusted production lines, inspected samples, and kept the machines running with remarkable efficiency. The rhythm never stopped. Strike. Release. Advance. Strike again. Thousands of times every hour. Every impact created another Kennedy $50. Each one appeared almost identical to the last. Almost. That single word changes everything. Because no matter how advanced minting technology becomes, absolute perfection remains impossible. Every die slowly wears. Every machine vibrates. Every adjustment leaves tiny clues behind. Collectors spend years learning how to recognize those clues. Imagine holding a 1972D Kennedy $50 beneath a bright lamp. At first glance it seems completely ordinary. President Kennedy's portrait appears strong. The lettering is clean. The Denver Mint mark sits quietly beneath the date. Turn the coin over. The presidential seal remains balanced and familiar, its eagle spreading powerful wings across the reverse. Nothing immediately demands attention. That is exactly why careful collectors continue looking. There is one detail hidden within some 1972D Kennedy $50 that many beginners mistake for damage. It is not damage. We will uncover that secret shortly. Before searching for varieties, begin exactly as professionals do. Hold the coin only by its edges. Place it beneath a single low-angle light source instead of bright overhead lighting. Allow the shadows to move naturally across Kennedy's portrait. Tiny details begin appearing. Minute contact marks. Die polish lines. Changes in luster. Subtle strike characteristics. The coin slowly reveals its personality. Now examine it with a 10x loupe. Start with the date. Move to the mint mark. Inspect every letter in Liberty. Then study Kennedy's hair one section at a time. Do not rush. Most discoveries are missed because people hurry. Experienced collectors understand that patience often reveals what excitement overlooks. Now compare the lettering. Does anything appear doubled? Look carefully before celebrating. The majority of apparent doubling seen on modern Kennedy $50 turns out to be machine doubling, a striking effect that produces flat, shelf-like secondary images but generally carries little collector premium. A genuine doubled die obverse is something entirely different. It originates during the creation of the die itself. The doubling becomes part of every coin struck from that die. Properly authenticated examples attract significantly greater collector attention. Learning to distinguish between the two takes practice. But that practice protects collectors from expensive mistakes. Next, rotate the coin by flipping it along its vertical axis. The reverse should align correctly with the obverse. If it does not, further study may be justified because rotational die errors occasionally escape the mint despite careful quality control. Most coins pass this test without issue. A small number do not. Those are the coins that keep specialists searching through thousands of ordinary examples. But there is another production mystery waiting inside the story of the 1972 D. Kennedy half-dollar. One that begins not with the coin, but with the dies that struck it. And once you understand how those dies slowly changed during production, you will never look at a 1972 D. Kennedy half-dollar the same way again. Every working die has a life story. It begins perfectly prepared, with every line of Kennedy's portrait sharp and every letter deeply impressed into hardened steel. During its first few thousand strikes, the results can be remarkably crisp. The hair above Kennedy's ear appears bold. The lettering is clean. The eagle on the reverse displays strong feather detail. Then time begins its quiet work. Not suddenly. Gradually. With every strike, tremendous pressure pushes metal into every recess of the die. The force is enormous, repeated hour after hour, day after day. Although the dies are made from hardened tool steel, they are not indestructible. They wear. They are polished. Sometimes they develop tiny fractures. Each stage leaves subtle clues that experienced collectors learn to recognize. That is one reason why two genuine 1972 D. Kennedy half-dollars can look surprisingly different despite being struck during the same year. One may display unusually bold detail. Another may appear slightly softer around Kennedy's hair or the eagle's wings. Neither is automatically better. Neither is automatically rare. They simply represent different moments in the life of the dies. Pick up the coin. Do it slowly. Feel its cool metal resting in the palm of your hand before you even look at the date. Notice the smooth rim touching your fingertips. Listen as it makes a soft metallic sound when it gently taps against another coin. It does not announce itself with brilliance or rarity. It feels ordinary. That is exactly why so many people spend it without a second thought. Yet somewhere in the United States, collectors have searched through thousands of Kennedy half-dollars hoping to find one extraordinary example hiding among hundreds of completely ordinary ones. Could yours be one of them? The answer is never found through guesswork. It is found through careful observation. That journey begins in 1992. America was entering a new decade filled with rapid technological change. Personal computers were becoming more common in homes and offices. Shopping malls were crowded every weekend. Video rental stores lined busy streets, and families gathered to watch movies on Friday nights. The internet existed, but only a tiny fraction of Americans had ever used it. Life moved quickly. Money moved even faster. Yet the Kennedy half-dollar quietly continued fading from everyday circulation. Banks still ordered them. The United States Mint still produced them. But most Americans reached for quarters instead. The half-dollar had become a familiar stranger, still legal tender, still beautifully designed, yet rarely seen in ordinary daily transactions. Ironically, that disappearing act helped preserve many examples in surprisingly attractive condition. Inside the Denver Mint, however, nothing felt unusual. Production followed a carefully controlled rhythm developed through decades of experience. Steel dies were mounted with precision. Fresh planchets rolled steadily toward the presses. Operators monitored the machinery. Inspectors sampled freshly struck coins throughout the day. Everything was designed for consistency. Strike. Release. Advance. Strike again. The machines never became bored. They never became distracted. They simply continued transforming blank pieces of metal into American history. Every finished 1992 D Kennedy half dollar looked nearly identical as it rolled away from the press. Nearly. That single word changes everything. Because perfect uniformity has never existed in coin production. Every die ages differently. Every striking press develops its own microscopic characteristics. Every production run leaves behind tiny clues that patient collectors eventually learn to recognize. Now imagine you have just removed a bright 1992 D Kennedy half dollar from an old bankroll. Hold it only by its edges. Position a single light source at a low angle and slowly rotate the coin beneath it. Watch the luster move. Notice how light flows across Kennedy's portrait. Healthy original surfaces create a beautiful cartwheel effect that seems to travel across the coin as it turns. Collectors love seeing that movement because it often indicates that the original mint surface has survived untouched. Now examine the coin using a 10x loop. Study Kennedy's hair one section at a time. Inspect the lettering around the rim. Look carefully at the Denver mint mark. Move to the reverse and examine the eagle, the shield, and every star surrounding the presidential seal. Most people have never looked this closely at a Kennedy half dollar. That is why they miss what collectors find. There is one subtle characteristic that occasionally appears on certain 1992 D coins, confusing even experienced beginners. We will reveal it shortly. But first, there is one important lesson every collector should remember. Never search for expensive errors before learning what a normal coin looks like. The normal coin is your reference. Without it, unusual features become impossible to recognize accurately. That simple habit has saved countless collectors from costly mistakes. And it has led others toward discoveries they never expected. The longer you study a coin, the more it begins to speak. Not with words. With details. A tiny mark beside the date. A slightly stronger strike across Kennedy's hair. A faint raised line running through the eagle's wings. Each clue asks the same question. How was this coin made? That question leads directly back to the Denver Mint in 1992. Every working die entered production in nearly perfect condition. During its earliest strikes, the details were bold and crisp. Kennedy's portrait appeared sharp. The lettering was clean. The eagle on the reverse displayed remarkable feather detail. Then the striking continued. Thousands of coins. Then tens of thousands. Eventually, the dies began to change. Not enough for the average person to notice, but enough for careful collectors to recognize. Sometimes mint technicians polished a working die to extend its useful life. That polishing could remove tiny imperfections, but it also slightly changed the appearance of certain design elements. Collectors studying large groups of 1992 D Kennedy half dollars occasionally notice these subtle differences between early and late die states. Neither version is automatically more valuable, but both tell part of the coin's manufacturing story. That is why experienced collectors compare coins instead of examining only one. Patterns become visible only through comparison. Now return to your coin. Examine the lettering in Liberty and In God We Trust. If you notice what appears to be doubling, do not immediately assume you have discovered a valuable variety. Look carefully. True doubled die obverse (DDO) varieties originate during the die-making process itself. The doubling usually appears rounded and consistent because it is actually part of the die. Machine doubling, on the other hand, usually looks flat and shelf-like. It happens during the strike rather than during die creation and generally carries little or no collector premium. Many beginners confuse the two. Patient study prevents expensive mistakes. Next, flip the coin on its vertical axis. The reverse should align correctly with the obverse. If it appears noticeably rotated, the coin deserves closer examination because a rotational die error occasionally escapes the mint despite careful quality control.